As this is not, all of you have been through this, so you know what this is about, and it's a hard day. It's a hard day in Israel. Just talking to our family in Israel this morning. In Israel last night, if you wanted to go to the movies or you wanted to go out to eat, everything was closed. The whole country was closed. We don't go out to eat on Yom Hashoah. We don't celebrate on Yom Hashoah. We don't just have our regular everyday lives on Yom Hashoah. Yom Hashoah is one day that the entire Jewish people needs to stop everything we're doing and take a step back and think about something very difficult. Everyone's following the news, I'm sure, on some level of what's happening in Ukraine. And it's horrible what's happening to the Jewish community, what's happening to the Gentile community, the terrible war crimes that are happening with Russian forces, and the way they're just terribly mistreating and doing horrible things. If you can imagine, as horrible as that is, the Shoah is just unfathomable in its scope of how horrible it was. And the question I have for you is, why do we want to remember something so sad? Why? Like, we want to do fun things, we want to be happy, we want to live our lives in a positive way. Why do we have to think back to something so painful and so difficult? And there's a lot to talk about that, but one thing to keep in mind is as follows. We're not just here living in 2022 in isolation. Each one of us is a link in a chain of history that goes very far back. Each Jewish young boy, young girl here is a link in a chain of Jewish history that goes very far back. And please God, will also go very far into the future. You know, it's hard to imagine that, but please God, one day you'll have children, you'll have grandchildren, they'll have children, and you'll be that link. We can't just think about ourselves. We need to think about who came before us and how we got to where we are. And of course, it's all the good times. Yom Ha'atzmaut next week and celebrating all of that. Our 8th graders are practicing. It's going to be amazing. But we also have to remember the difficult times. We also have to remember the lows and how we survived and how we were inspired to get through it as a nation, even though so many were killed. But the Jewish nation survived and is thriving. And how did we do that? With the help of Hashem, of course. And what can we learn from these stories? So we need to remember those times as well, to realize our place in Jewish history as Jewish young adults. Our 5th graders are going to lead us through the program this morning, as you know, so please give them your full attention now as they march in.
told where we are going.
I do not know.
What should we take on this unknown journey?
Should I take my photos, my soccer ball, my school books? There's one thing I would not leave behind. This will give me hope that one day we will not have to run away, that one day we will have a home of our own where we will be safe and strong.
And I will take my sitter, the one that Bobby gave me. It will give me hope that one day that Hashem will protect us, and one day we will not have to run.
We have all heard of the number 6 million. We know this number from the time we first hear about the Holocaust as children. Yet this number that we cannot possibly understand. The only way to remember the 6 million individuals who died at the hands of the Nazis, to honor those who survived, is to tell and retell their individual stories.
This year, we would like to share the stories of a few heroes. Some who survived and some who didn't. Each of these people can teach us something about being a better person. Each of these people resisted the evil and hatred that the Nazis used as a weapon to try and destroy us.
Sometimes this resistance was physical, sometimes it was spiritual, but together, all of these acts of resistance were the force that kept the Jewish people's spirit alive. The fact that we stand here today as proud Jews is evidence of that. Sadly, many survivors are no longer able to share their stories and memories. Their stories live on in us. The first story that we want to share with you is the incredible story of the righteous people who risked their lives to save their Jewish neighbors. When Yad Vashem, the important Holocaust Museum and Education Center in Yerushalayim, was established in 1953 by the Knesset, one of its tasks was to commemorate righteous among the nations.
These righteous people were not Jews who risked their lives to save Jews during the Holocaust. Most of these people did not think themselves as heroes. In their opinion, the Jews acted as human beings who respected the lives of other human beings.
This story is not just about one or two people, but the story of an entire country and its king, who stood up to the Nazis and protected their countrymen. At the beginning of World War II, there were 7,500 Jews living in Denmark. When the Nazis occupied the country in 1943, they told the Danish government to round up the Jews and prepare for their deportation to Auschwitz. The Danish people, with the support of their king, refused. They came up with a plan to save the Danish Jews.
Living in the United States. In 1943, Steen's family lived in a small town in Denmark and did not hear of the rescue efforts in the capital of Copenhagen. They were part of the 400 Danish Jews who were deported to Theresienstadt. Thanks to the protection of the Danish government, they were not deported to Auschwitz and survived.
The Danish people, or many of the Danish people in that area, as far as I'm concerned, especially now that I know more about it, they were truly what I refer to as upstanders. If you look at the Webster Dictionary, you won't find the word upstander, but I think it's a very good word, and there's no reason why we can't have upstanders if we have bystanders. And what they did was so unique that there's been a great deal written about it, and there have been films and videos, and it's amazing. As a result, 95% of the Danish population, the Danish Jews, I should say, managed to escape to Sweden. And the Danish people would be hiding the Jews in their homes, they would be hiding them in churches, they were actually hiding them in hospitals, and they were registered under false names, and they managed to escape to Sweden.
Our next story is one of spiritual resistance. What does this mean? Spiritual resistance meant that the Jewish people resisted the Nazis' attempt to break their spirit by fiercely holding on to their humanity, dignity, and their connection to the Jewish people and Jewish traditions. Sometimes this could be as simple as saying the Shema, lighting a Shad's candle, or sharing the only piece of potato with another starving prisoner, or simply not giving up hope.
Over the last few months, we have all been focused on the plight of people of Ukraine and their fight against Russia. We have watched millions of refugees stream out of Ukraine looking for safety in other countries. We have been especially proud that Israel has taken in thousands of Ukrainian Jewish refugees. Sadly, the Ukrainian Jews had no one to come to their rescue during the Holocaust when both the Nazis and most Ukrainian people showed them no mercy.
Brenda Huss was born in 1926 in Horodyanka, Ukraine. On December 5, 1941, the Jews in Horodyanka were forced to gather in the center of town. They were being sent on trains to Majdanek, a concentration camp where Jews were killed. Brenda, her little sister, and 3 brothers escaped the roundup. In happier times, they had often played in the fields and forests around their town. There, they had noticed the openings in the ground that led to a giant system of caves.
Brenda's older brothers, Nachman and Label, led their siblings to these caves. They carefully helped them climb down, down, down into the darkness. They hid in this darkness for 2 years. At night, Nachman and Label would climb out of the cave and search for food.
We're back. We ran to the closest farm and stole 2 potatoes. This is all we could find.
We'll cut them into pieces and share.
Let's give the biggest piece to Ritha. She's so thin and sick. I'm so worried about her.
Yes, we will give her the biggest piece, and tomorrow night we will go out to search for some milk or cheese to make her stronger.
Now, let's try and sleep.
Every night I try to sleep, but there is no day or night in this cave, only darkness.
We dream of the old days, the warm challah our mother made us for Shabbos, or the candies our bubby gave us after school each day.
We can only dream and hope that one day we will see the light of day and the light of freedom again.
One day we heard commotion, we heard German. Jude, 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 they were sticking their bayonets in to see if they could get somebody. We almost stopped reading because we heard what's going on. And they screamed and they screamed and they pushed their bayonets, but they left. Because of my older brothers, I'm alive. Nachman and Label. And they are the ones who were responsible for my life. They said, you wait here, we're going to look where we can hide again. So they left us there. And we were waiting, and all of a sudden we see our brothers returning, and they said, now we found a place. It was a natural cave with tunnels. Natural tunnels. And we had to learn how to climb down there, 25 feet down. We lived there for 22 months.
Brenda's sister Rivka and her brother Fievel died in the cave of starvation. Brenda and her two older brothers survived in the caves. When the war ended in 1945, they went back to their town to search for their parents. Their parents never returned. Brenda married a Holocaust survivor. They moved to Chicago in 1949. Brenda taught Hebrew to first graders for 25 years. She never spoke of her years of hiding in the dark caves until she told her story to our 8th graders several years ago as part of a Names Not Numbers project. Sadly, Brenda passed away in 2018. We honor her and remember her by sharing her incredible story of survival.
One of the most powerful examples of both physical and spiritual resistance is the story of the Warsaw Ghetto. On October 12, 1940, the Germans decreed the establishment of a ghetto in Warsaw. 400,000 Jews were crowded into the ghetto, and the conditions soon became unbearable. People starved to death on the streets. Disease was rampant, but the Jews continued to have hope.
Nazi Germany invaded Poland on September 1st, 1939. The Germans immediately subjected 2 million Polish Jews to violence, humiliation, and arbitrary kidnappings for forced labor. The Nazis concentrated the Jews into larger cities. What followed was the establishment of ghettos. Jews were trapped inside and kept under guard. They were usually forced into areas that were much too small, causing catastrophic overcrowding. They were systematically starved. Disease was rife. Poverty was crushing. The unbearable living conditions were intended to dehumanize the Jews and break their spirit. Escalating chaos caused many to sink into hopelessness. In this daily battle to survive, we might expect that people would worry only about themselves. Yet, some were able to rise above their circumstances and assist others. They drew on pre-war social, religious, and communal traditions by establishing hospitals, soup kitchens, and orphanages. Against Nazi prohibitions, they created schools.
When the Nazis began to deport the Jews of Warsaw to the death camp of Treblinka, many Jews decided the moment had come to fight back. Last year's 5th graders told the story of Mordechai Anilovich, who organized this group of Jews into a fighting force. These brave fighters managed to hold off the German army for almost a month.
The Jews of the Warsaw Ghetto also fought back in another way, with words and books rather than guns and bullets. Emmanuel Ringelblum was a teacher, historian, and community worker who ran welfare programs and soup kitchens for the Jews of the Warsaw Ghetto. He was determined to record a complete description of what was happening for future generations. Ringelblum would collect information during the day and write notes at night. He chose to fight the Nazis with words and books rather than guns and bullets.
We must do something to tell the world about what is happening here in the ghetto. This story must be told, even if we do not survive.
But how? The ghetto is surrounded. No one's allowed in or out. If we are spotted trying to smuggle out letters or books, we'll be shot.
Emmanuel is right. Despite the danger, we need to make sure people know what happened here. They need to know that even with hunger and disease, we are still teaching our children, nursing our sick, learning Torah, trying so hard to survive another day, struggling to have hope.
I have an idea. We will collect books, notes, diaries, memoirs, photographs. We will make an archive so that the world can read and know what happens here.
We must try and get these reports to people outside the ghetto, to the Polish partisans, and maybe they can tell the world.
We should meet secretly on Shabbos afternoon, so no one will suspect what we are planning. We will form a small group, but we must be very secretive. Several years passed. The condition in the Warsaw Ghetto grew worse every day. More and more Jews were forced onto trains and taken to Treblinka, but still Emmanuel and his team persisted. They called their group the Oneg Shabbos Archive.
Today was a horrible day. Most of our committee members have been taken away by the Nazis. We realized that we must start to hide everything we have before we are caught. Tomorrow we will begin to bury all of our hard work somewhere underground. We have found some milk cans in which to place all of our writings, the books, diaries, reports, letters. They must live to tell our story, even if we do not survive.
Emmanuel and his team were able to secretly hide their papers, but sadly Emmanuel did not survive the war. He and his family were murdered in 1944. When the war finally ended in 1945, survivors of the ghetto returned to find the milk cans that were hidden by Emmanuel and his colleagues.
One of the sites was uncovered in 1946 and the second in 1950. The others have never been located. The writings that were found testified the spirits of the heroes in the ghetto, who made such a tremendous effort to ensure the future generations would have a true picture of Jewish life during the Holocaust.
Our final story has a happy ending. Hannah and Yitzhak, the brother and sister you met at the beginning of the ceremony, were separated from their families and each other when they arrived in Auschwitz. Both were sent to labor camps. Both were sent to labor camps. Both survived. They were each ended up in a displaced persons camp. Each was finally able to board a ship to Palestine in 1948. Neither one knew that the other had survived until his faithful.
Hannah Rubenstein. Hannah Rubenstein.
Did someone say Hannah Rubenstein? Did someone say Hannah Rubenstein?
Take off your hat. Is it really you? My little brother Yitzchak, a chayal?
And is it you, my big sister Hannah? Have you heard anything of Mama, Papa, or little Rivka?
They are all gone. We are the only survivors. Do you have any pictures of Mama and Papa so that we can remember them?
I have nothing from our life before the war, except one thing. I kept it with me in my labor camp, hidden in my shoes.
I too only have one thing. It gave me the strength when I was ready to give up.
the heroes of the Warsaw Ghetto in the Oyneg Shabbos archives, God and your brother Yitzhak. We share their stories in Yom HaShoah, and we ask that you tell and retell these stories in the future.
We ask that you think about the acts of kindness and resistance, the strong faith in Hashem, the courage to risk one's life to save another. We ask that these stories encourage each of you to do acts of kindness to help those around you. We ask that these stories encourage each of you to be better people. This is how we honor the 6 million who perished in the Hashoah. Yihi Zechron Baruch. May their memories be a blessing to us all.
Please join us as we sing Achinu together in memory of all the heroes who risked their lives to save our people, in memory of all those who perished during the Shoah, and an honor to all those who survived to tell their stories.
We ask that the audience join us as we sing Aleinu.
Okay, we're not going to applaud, of course, because it's not in the spirit of this kind of program to applaud, but I have to say a tremendous kol kavod to the 5th grade. Both the first session and now the second session, just beyond words, incredibly inspiring, and a tremendous thank you to Mrs. Pinchot for writing, producing, directing the entire program to really help us connect a little bit, and again, a tiny, tiny, tiny bit with some of the things that happened at the Holocaust, with just a few of the stories. And Mrs. Huss, who is a teacher at Hillel Torah for 25 years, who hid in caves for 2 years. Unbelievable stories we can't even begin to imagine, and to be inspired by them. And today, as we remember all those who perished, we're going to now light candles. Why do we light candles? Torah tells us that the flame is compared to the neshama of a person. So when someone passes away, we light a candle to show that the neshama lives on. Even after the body is no longer in this world, disintegrates, the neshama is eternal. And of course, to light 6 million candles wouldn't be possible. So unfortunately, it's only one candle for every 1 million people, and 1 million children as well, who were killed We're going to then say the Kamalei Rachamim, and these candles are going to be outside throughout the day with the 8th graders who are going to be standing next to the candles reciting Tehillim and reciting additional names. And we're also going to be reciting names on the loudspeaker that were given by your families and previous Hillel Torah students' families of people family members who died, to remember each one of them as well. We're now going to ask students whose family members, who are children of survivors, great-grandchildren of survivors and their families, to lead us in lighting these candles.
And I just want to add that A.B. and Ben, we had the tremendous privilege, as the 8th graders know, of hearing the story of their great-grandmother, and they have such a privilege to know their great-grandmother so well. So A.B. is going to start with lighting the candle.
That's right, as part of this year's Names Not Numbers. Watch the candles, look at the flames. We think of those neshamot, those pure souls who died al Kiddush Hashem.
Great-grandparents who were murdered in Majdanek and Auschwitz. You heard a little bit about that during the ceremony.
Okay. I'd like to ask everyone to please rise to the Kamalei Rachamim prayer. This is the tefillah. I'm sure young children aren't so familiar with it. It's the tefillah that we say for the neshama, for the soul of a person who passes away. It's said at a funeral. It's said at a yard site, and of course, for the 6 million neshamot. Today we're going to say just one tefillah, but we're going to have them all in mind, and they'll all answer amen. And this is just one day that we're taking throughout the year. This could be every day. 6 million days we could be doing this, but it's a little too hard. So at least one day we could try to focus. As you see these candles, they're going to be outside the lobby with our 8th graders next to them. As you walk by, the 5th graders, 6th graders, as you walk by today, pause for a minute. Don't just walk by and treat it like a regular day. When you see the candles, pause for a moment and think about the 6 million. Think about one person. Think about one of the stories. Think about your grandparents. Think about that. This day shouldn't be like any other day. This is Yom Hashoah. El Malei Rachamim, Shochei Namramim, Amtzei Menucha Nechona al Kanfei Hashchina, B'ma'alot Kedoshim U'Torim, Kezar Rekia Masirim, Kol HaNeshamot, Shesheshet Milyonei HaYudim, Chalolei HaShoah, Shenehegu, Shenishchetu, Shenisrafu, Shenispu, Al Kiddush Hashem. הם מרחצים הגרמנים ועוזריהם משאר העמים, לכן בעל הרחמים יסרים בסתר כנפיו לעולמים. בצרור החיים את נשמותיהם, אדוני הוא נחלתם, בגן עדן תהא מנוחתם. ויעמדו לגורלם לקץ הימין ונאמר amen. Please remain standing. We're going to conclude with Hatikva, the great hope, that the hope of so many who were killed was only to see the state of Israel, that we are so fortunate to have in our lifetime, to be able to be there, to visit, to live there. And what a great privilege we have. And on a day like today, also to think about all the privileges we have. And what are we going to do with those privileges? As we said in the beginning, we are part of that chain. How are we going to continue that chain of those from before us? How could we continue what they stood for? How could we do more mitzvot, learn more Torah, do more chesed, and be inspired by everything that they stood for?